military strikes Iran's nuclear sites. Malaysia elected as a member of OIC Human Rights Commission. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia MADANI. This is World Today. I am Olivia Nicholas. President Donald Trump said the U.S. military launched an attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, including the Fordo uranium enrichment plant, as Washington joined Israel's air campaign against Tehran. He threatened more attacks if Iran does not make peace.
Trump said a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site for the nuclear enrichment plant, apart from Natanz and Isfahan facilities. He did not reveal the kind of U.S. planes or munitions that were involved. A U.S. official, however, said U.S. B-2 bombers were involved in the strikes. Iranian media confirmed that part of the Fordo plant, as well as the Isfahan and Natanz nuclear sites, were attacked. The fresh U.S. military entanglement comes despite Trump's promises to avoid another forever war in West Asia. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization condemned the U.S. attack on key nuclear sites as barbaric and in violation of international law. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, meanwhile, voiced concern at strikes carried out by the U.S. on Iran. He called them a dangerous escalation in a region already on the edge and a direct threat to international peace and security.
On a related note, the United Nations said the Israel-Iran war must not be allowed to trigger another refugee crisis in West Asia, saying once people fled, there was no quick way back. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, said the intensity of the attacks between the two sides was already triggering population movements in both countries.
The agency said such movements had already been reported from Tehran and other parts of Iran, with some people crossing into neighboring countries. Strikes in Israel, meanwhile, had caused people to seek shelter elsewhere in the country and in some cases abroad. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said the region has already endured more than its share of war, loss and displacement. He noted that another refugee crisis should not be allowed to take root as the consequences last for generations. Iran hosts the largest number of refugees in the world, around 3.5 million, most of them from Afghanistan. The UNHCR said if the conflict persists, Iran's existing refugee populations would also face renewed uncertainty and more hardship. The agency called for an urgent de-escalation in the conflict and urged countries in the region to respect the right of people to seek safety.
A privately run aid organization brought in to distribute food rations in war-hit Gaza last month, with U.S. and Israeli backing, said that people in the Palestinian territory desperately need more aid. The admission by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that it has been unable to meet demand came after severe criticism from other aid groups and nearly daily deadly shootings near distribution points.
Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said yesterday that Israeli troops had killed at least 17 people, including 8 who were seeking food in the territory, which is suffering from famine-like conditions due to Israeli restrictions. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said it was delivering aid at scale, but it cannot meet the full scale of need while large parts of Gaza remain closed. The organization added the people of Gaza desperately need more assistance, and it is ready to partner with other humanitarian groups to expand its reach to those who need help the most. The foundation's operations have been slammed as a failure by the United Nations, while other aid groups have raised concerns about the group's opaque structure and neutrality in the conflict. Hundreds have been killed by Israeli forces while trying to reach the charity's aid distribution sites.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched in European cities, calling for an end to the war in Gaza amid concerns the Israel-Iran conflict could spark wider regional devastation.
In London, tens of thousands of protesters waved Palestinian flags as they marched through the British capital. There have been monthly protests in the British capital since the start of the 20-month-long war between Israel and Hamas, which has ravaged Gaza. Yesterday, protesters there carried signs including "Stop Arming Israel" and "No War on Iran" as they marched in the sweltering heat. In Berlin, more than 10,000 people gathered in the center of the city in support of Gaza. Demonstrators assembled mid-afternoon close to the parliament, some chanting "Germany finances, Israel bombs." Over in Italy, thousands of people marched to Rome's Colosseum to demonstrate against the war in Palestine and the military policies of states. The demonstrators believe that it is essential to speak out against the maneuver that is being made to divert funds and resources from public spending to military spending at the expense of people's welfare and lives to fund genocidal projects such as those in Palestine.
A suicide attack in Nigeria's Borno state by a woman allegedly acting for Boko Haram has killed at least 20 anti-terrorist fighters. A woman allegedly detonated explosives strapped to her body at a haunt for vigilant and local hunters assisting the Nigerian military in fighting terrorists in the town of Kongundo Daga.
Late on Friday, the alleged bomber was dressed as a local heading to the crowded nearby fish market. She detonated her explosive as soon as she reached the shed used by the militia fighters as a hangout. At least 16 were wounded, with 10 of them nursing severe injuries in 2 hospitals in Maiduguri. Konduga Fish Market, which is usually busy at night, has been the target of a series of suicide attacks in the past. Surrounding villages have also been repeatedly targeted by suicide bombers said to be acting for Boko Haram, an armed group that has been active in the area for at least 16 years. Konduga town itself had seen a lull in such attacks in the past year. The conflict between the authorities and Boko Haram has been ongoing for 16 years, with more than 40,000 people have died and around 2 million displaced from their homes.
Still ahead, at least 8 dead in Brazil hot air balloon accident.
Guna mentol jimat tenaga untuk lebih jimat.
Malaysia has been elected as a member of the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission (IPHRC) of the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation (OIC) for the 2025-2028 term. The Foreign Ministry announced that Minister Dato Sri Muhammad Hassan led Malaysia's lobbying efforts during the election session held on the sidelines of the 51st Council of Foreign Ministers meeting in Istanbul.
The ministry noted that Malaysia's candidate, Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Aisha Bidin, will serve on the commission for the said term beginning this August. She has extensive experience and exposure in the field of human rights and humanitarian issues, especially during her tenure as a commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. The ministry said Malaysia's membership in the IPHRC will contribute to the socio-economic development of member states for the well-being of the Ummah.
India's Interior Minister Amit Shah said New Delhi will never reinstate a key water treaty it suspended with Pakistan over deadly violence in India-administered Kashmir. He said India will take the water that was flowing to Pakistan to Rajasthan state by constructing a canal, saying that Pakistan will be starved of water that it has been getting unjustifiably.
India halted the agreement following an April attack on civilians, which it caused Pakistan of backing, a charge denied by Islamabad, and one which was followed by days of fighting between the two forces. Despite a ceasefire holding, India's Interior Minister said his government would not restore the treaty which governs river water critical to parched Pakistan. The 1960 Indus Water Treaty gave India and Pakistan 3 Himalayan rivers each and the right to hydropower and irrigation resources. It established the India-Pakistan Indus Commission, which is supposed to resolve any problems that arise. Halting the water agreement was one of a series of tit-for-tat diplomatic measures taken by both countries in the immediate aftermath of the Kashmir attack. Islamabad, however, said the treaty cannot be amended nor can it be terminated by any party unless both agree.
New Delhi's civil aviation regulator has ordered Air India to remove 3 officials from their roles over systemic failures as the carrier comes under scrutiny after a deadly crash.
The instruction from the Directorate General of Civil Aviation did not detail whether it was linked to the 12 June crash in Ahmedabad, which killed all but one of the 242 people on board. At least 38 others on the ground were also killed. The directive noted that the airline's voluntary disclosures point to systemic failures in crew scheduling, compliance monitoring and internal accountability. The regulator directed Air India to remove the 3 officials from all roles and responsibilities related to crew scheduling, take disciplinary action and report on steps taken within 10 days. It added future violations could also result in license suspension. The airline said it had implemented the order, stressing that Air India is committed to ensuring that there is total adherence to safety protocols and standard practices. Investigators are attempting to find out what caused the airline's London-bound plane to hurtle to the ground moments after takeoff in Ahmedabad. Air India said the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner plane was well maintained and the pilots were accomplished flyers.
Elsewhere, at least 8 people were killed when a hot air balloon with 21 passengers caught fire in southern Brazil. It was the second fatal balloon accident in the vast South American country in less than a week.
The balloon erupted in flames above a rural area outside the Atlantic coast town of Praia Grande, a tourist hotspot popular for hot air ballooning. The basket carrying the passengers plummeted dozens of meters to the ground in flames. Weather conditions were clear at the time of the incident. Firefighters said the 13 survivors were treated at hospitals. According to the police, the pilot told officials that the fire was sparked by a blowtorch used to ignite the balloon's main flame in the basket. The pilot tried to bring the balloon down as soon as the fire erupted, and once it was close to the ground, he told the passengers to jump from the basket. However, some of them could not make the leap and the fire grew. A fire department official informed that 4 people were burned to death and 4 others died from injuries sustained in the fall. An investigation was launched to determine the cause of the disaster. Less than a week ago, a woman died during a balloon ride in southeastern Sao Paulo state.
Belarus freed top opposition figure Sergei Tikhanovsky and more than a dozen other political prisoners following an appeal from the White House. The release came just hours after U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg met Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in Minsk, the highest profile visit of a U.S. official to the authoritarian state in years.
Tikhanovsky's wife, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who took the mantle of the opposition movement after her husband's jailing, thanked U.S. President Donald Trump for brokering the deal. European politicians and members of Belarus's exiled opposition also welcomed the news. Tikhanovsky had been imprisoned for more than 5 years. The popular YouTuber had planned to run against Lukashenko in the August 2020 presidential election, but was arrested and detained weeks before the vote. He was sentenced in 2021 to 18 years in prison for organizing riots and inciting hatred, then to another 18 months for insubordination. Svetlana, a political novice, at the time of her husband's arrest, ran against Lukashenko in his place but lost after what the opposition described as widespread falsification.
Next up in sports, Marc Marquez continues marching towards 7th elite world title.
tingkap dan pintu untuk kekal dingin dan lebih jimat.
Inter Milan left it late in Seattle to beat Japanese side Urawa Red Diamonds 2-1 in Group E of the Club World Cup. The Italians were stunned early in the first half when a counter-attack resulted in Urawa scoring through Ryoma Watanabe with their first chance of the game in the 11th minute.
Defense with Argentine striker Lautaro Martinez coming closest after heading the ball against the crossbar in the 9-2 losses.
In tennis, informed Carlos Alcaraz swept past fellow Spaniard Roberto Bautista Agut to stretch his winning streak and set up a Queen's Club final against Czech Jiří Lehečka. Top seed Alcaraz had too much firepower for his 37-year-old opponent during a 6-4, 6-4 victory, his 17th successive win and the 250th of his career.
Alcaraz was stretched to the absolute limit against compatriot Jaume Munar earlier in the week during a tussle lasting more than 3 hours. But he was more comfortable against Bautista Agut, who provided stubborn resistance but never really looked like springing an upset on a sultry afternoon in West London. An early break of serve in each set proved sufficient for Alcaraz, who reached his 5th final in a row. Earlier, world number 30 Lehečka silenced the crowd by beating Jake Draper. Second seed Draper dropped his opening service game and Lehečka barely put a foot wrong as he took the first set in clinical fashion. Left-hander Draper saved a break point early in the second set and broke fellow 23-year-old Lehečka's serve for the first time in the 10th game to level the match. Both players were rock solid on serve in the decider, with Lehečka's having the first chance of a break at 4-all, but Draper survived to pile the pressure on his opponent. Lehečka did not flinch through and broke serve at 5-all with 2 stunning pass shots to leave Draper smashing his racket in rage. Lehečka still needed to hold his serve to reach the final, and he did so in style, roaring his delight after clinching his first victory against a top 10 player.
Elsewhere, Marketa Vondrousova brushed aside world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka in Berlin to reach her first final since lifting the Wimbledon title 2 years ago. The 25-year-old Czech dominated Sabalenka 6-2, 6-4 to set up a title clash with Chinese qualifier Wang Xinyu. Meanwhile, Norway's Kasper Ruud has put Sabalenka's first serve let her down in the opening set, but the Belarusian fought back to start the second with a break. 2 games down, Vondrousova levelled at 2-all, then broke to lead 5-4, wrapping up the win, her first ever over a world number 1, but not before saving 3 consecutive break points with an ace after 1 hour and 5 minutes of play. Sabalenka, meanwhile, was losing only her first semi-final in 8 last 4 appearances this year. Qualifier Wang Xinyu will play against Vondrousova in the final of the German Open after the Chinese player beat Russian Lyudmila Samsonova a 6-4, 6-1 in an hour and 15 minutes to reach the first final of her career.
Meanwhile, Norway's Kasper Ruud has pulled out of Wimbledon as he is still struggling to recover from a knee injury. The world number 16 and 2-time French Open finalist suffered a shock second round exit at the clay court major last month, losing the unseeded Nuno Borges of Portugal. Ruud said he had been struggling with a knee injury for some time and he has not been in action on the men's tour since withdrawing from the grass court event in Mallorca. His manager Tina Falster said that Ruud is back on the court and things are going well. However, she said it looks like playing best of 5 set in unfortunately a bit too soon for him, and instead he will compete in Gstaad. Ruud's best showing at Wimbledon is 3 second-round appearances. Wimbledon starts on 30th of June while the Swiss Open in Gstaad begins on the 14th of July.
In MotoGP, Marc Marquez continued his march towards a 7th elite world title by winning the sprint race at the Italian track and extending his lead at the top of the championship. The Spanish motorcycling great had to battle back from a disaster start from pole position at Mugello to claim the full 12 points and move 35 points clear of his closest challenger and brother Alex Marquez.
Marc Marquez, who dropped back into the middle of the pack after fluffing his start on his Ducati bike, eventually finished 1.441 seconds ahead of his second-place sibling after overtaking him on the 4th lap. His teammate Francesco Bagnaia, who has won the last 3 GPs on home soil at Mugello, dropped back to position into 3rd and is now 98 points off the pace in the title race. It was Marc Marquez's 8th win from 9 sprint races this season after conquering his 100th career pole, and sets him up for another perfect weekend in what has been a dream campaign in his first season with Ducati's factory team. He has won the sprint and main race at the Thailand-Argentina Qatar and Aragon MotoGP with 8 race weekends completed so far this year. The 32-year-old is already red-hot favourite to draw level with great rival Valentino Rossi on 7 world crowns and move 1 behind all-time record winner Giacomo Cassottini.
From solar-powered boat race to ancient shipwreck, take a look at amazing offbeat stories this week.
Brazilian university students recently participated in a solar-powered sailing competition in the city of Niterói. Students from the states of Rio de Janeiro, Santa Catarina and Espírito Santo prepped their solar panel boats on the beach before sending them off to the water, where they would be judged on their technological efficiency, navigation ability and performance.
O momento que a gente estimula uma competição dessa é como uma Fórmula 1, né? Você está estimulando o desenvolvimento para que as embarcações possam contribuir com a tecnologia mais consolidada, mais madura, e assim a gente ajuda na transição energética.
Quando o estudante ele recebe essa informação, ele começa a pensar mais no meio ambiente. Então ele vai para o mercado de trabalho já com essa consciência de se importar com o meio ambiente e como isso vai impactar as gerações futuras.
The event was organized by Rio de Janeiro State Sports Entity with the sponsorship of Enel Rio Energy Company. Researchers have identified a shipwreck off Porkala in southern Finland as a Swedish warship Falcon, a 17th century vessel built in Stockholm and considered the little sister of the iconic Vasa ship. The shipwreck was discovered 50 years ago, but it is only now that Associate Professor Niklas Eriksson has been able to identify it thanks to a digital 3D model of the ship created by the Finnish Maritime Archaeological Society.
We have realized that a lot of this ship still is preserved and it rests very shallow water, but despite the fact that people have been salvaging the rig and the guns and so on after the wreckage, a lot of the ship is still preserved, although it has collapsed and disintegrated, but most of the ship is still down there.
Falcon was likely constructed by the same shipbuilder as Vasa in 1631 and sank under unclear circumstances after 20 years of service. Researchers aim to uncover more details about the ship's history, its crew and life aboard a 17th century vessel through continued dives. Eriksson said they were struck by how similar Falcon was to Vasa. The Vasa ship famously sank in Stockholm during its maiden voyage in 1628 but was salvaged in 1961 and is on display at the Vasa Museum in the Swedish capital. In an accidental find, the 10th century burial site believed to have belonged to a Viking noble family has been discovered in northern Denmark, packed with a spectacular trove of ancient objects. Discovery came when pearls, coins, ceramics and a box containing a gold thread were unearthed during construction work near Lisberg, a village located 7 kilometers north of Aarhus, Denmark's second largest city. Archaeologists found the site contained around 30 graves dating from the second half of the 10th century when the famous king Harald Bluetooth reigned. According to the museum's archaeologists, the graves are most likely linked to a noble family from the Viking Age, which lasted between the 8th and the 11th centuries, whose farm was discovered less than a kilometer from the burial site in the late 1980s. Researchers also discovered some human remains such as teeth and bones at the site. One of the graves, which scientists believe belonged to an important woman, contained a box filled with decorative objects and a pair of scissors. The magnificent box is a remarkable find, with only a few having been discovered before, including one in southeastern Germany. Aiming to alleviate taxidermy to high art, Art Zoo was opened in the heart of the Dutch capital Amsterdam in a famous building from the 17th century, a period that inspired the two artists that created the show. Artist Ferry van Tongeren said the work was inspired by 17th century sculptures and painters from the Golden Age. In that period, Dutch Golden Age painters drew inspiration from brightly colored parrots, big cats and exotic animals captured in distant colonies and brought back to Europe to great amazement. They were often painted in theatrical poses, wings spread or neck extended, which the artists tried to replicate with their stuffed displays. A stuffed swan with wings deployed in defensive posture is a nod to the threatened swan by Golden Age master Jan Azaliddin, currently hanging in the Ridge Museum nearby. In other exhibits, majestic tigers were displayed poised to attack, while birds of prey gripped long snakes in their claws. To head off criticism from animal lovers, the artists had prominently displayed a sign with their golden rule. None of the animals in their taxidermy artworks were taken from the wild or bred specifically for the Art Zoo Museum. All of them died of natural causes under the care of zoos and breeders.
And that wraps our World Today. In our top story, US military strikes Iran's nuclear sites. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight, coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and Saluran Berita RTM. Till then, I'm Olivia Nicholas, Malaysia MADANI, Rakyat Disantuni. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.